Well, it was illegal when you did it, but it's not illegal now. So what happens? I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. And Bill, there are a bunch of people awaiting trial or various kinds of disposition of their cases, and there are people behind bars, and there are some people who are not behind bars, but they may be in probation or just have this thing on their record that's legal in a lot of states now. And I suppose by now you've guessed I'm talking about marijuana usage. There are hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of these cases at various points of the process, Bill. And now in many of these states where people got busted for these things, it's no longer illegal. So what do we do? There are several classes of people. What do we do with the people who are in jail? What do we do with the people who are awaiting trial? What do we do with the people who have already been through the whole legal process and just have this in their records? You can take those in any order that you like.
So we're talking about people specifically in states where marijuana usage is now legal. Is that
yes?
Okay. Well, first of all, the idea that they should just be forgiven, I think, just goes right out the window. You know, it was a crime when they did it. They knew it was a crime when they did it. And by the way, I don't think anybody's in jail for smoking a joint on the corner. You know, most of these people who are on marijuana charges have done some kind of dealing or another. So they're fully aware of the fact that they broke the law. And listen, drinking beer was against the law during Prohibition. And just to say that it's not against the law now doesn't mean that the criminals that ran all of the bootlegging organizations should suddenly just be exonerated. They were breaking the law. And it was a terrible law, the Prohibition law. And as a kind of a guy who's more of a, leave people alone kind of guy, I generally don't have any problem with the legalization of marijuana. Certainly here in Los Angeles, as you saw when you were here, every fifth store is a green cross, and you go in there and get your prescription for your headaches or your blurry vision or your hunger, and you come out with lots and lots and lots of marijuana. In fact, there's a bicycle delivery service now, so you can have your pot delivered straight to your home, and off you go. But that's not the point. The point is the law is the law. Laws change, and so if you were breaking the law and now you're not, that doesn't mean you didn't break the law when you broke it. So there's that.
So you're awaiting trial right now for something that is no longer illegal.
So with that said, given the prison overcrowdings and given the fact that a lot of these drug charges are things of this kind of nature, multiple, marijuana use or maybe a little bit of marijuana dealing or something, I think the best probable solution is to let most of these people go with a conviction, and that's the fundamental difference for me. I don't see any reason to keep people in jail over this, and it's not a question of it being suddenly legal now. I just never really thought it was given the scale of people that need to be locked up in this country, it was not high on my list of things I was worried about. So if you'd committed a crime, a marijuana crime, in a state where marijuana is now legal, then I actually think that probably the best solution, the fairest solution, certainly the most expedient one in terms of the genuine resource pressure we face, would be to basically say, here's the plea argument, here's the plea bargain. You plead guilty to these charges, and after you've pled guilty to the charges, you go free. Now, the reason that that's not just a, hey, have a good day, is because now you've got a felony conviction, and that's what you deserve.
Well, the felony conviction or misdemeanor, whatever it happens to be, and if it's a small possession charge, Bill, isn't changing the law like this a tacit admission on the part of society or the government or the people as a whole that they were wrong to make this illegal and that they have now, in this act of contrition, made it legal? So why should you still be forced to pay the price for something that society has said, oops, we made a mistake there?
It's obvious that laws change over time, and the natural laws don't change. That's why we believe in natural laws. The laws against murdering people, hurting them, raping them, taking their stuff, assault, all that stuff. But actual other laws change. Now, if you want to say that this law was a bad law, it certainly didn't seem to be a bad law when it was put in place. And if you look at how the society has decayed from the 1950s until now, You can make a pretty good case for there having been a reason to put that law in place and actually enforce it. But whether or not you buy that is not relevant. What's relevant is who decides. We don't just get to decide whether what we're doing is against the law or not. If everybody were to make a personal decision about whether or not they were breaking the law at that time, is a good law, bad law, if we all made individual decisions about whether this was a good law or a bad law, therefore I'm going to break it or not, then there would be no law whatsoever. You know, you could find lots of people out there, lots and lots and lots of people who would say, no, you have every right to go into a rich person's house and take everything they've got because they're rich. And you're not. So the law is the law. And if the law changes, then okay, that's how a society, a relatively healthy society, deals with changes in society over large periods of time. But when the law is in place and you break the law, you've broken the law. Whether it was a good law or bad law is just simply not relevant to the fact that you knew it was against the law when you did it. And if you had thought it was such a bad law at the time, rather than breaking it, what you should have been doing is politically lobbying to get those laws overturned, which is exactly what happened.
Well, Bill, aren't you effectively then defeating your own argument? Because basically what you're saying is if you're going to put that conviction on a person's record, what you're doing is you're leaving the decision about the significance of that conviction in the hands of innumerable future potential employers. So instead of saying, look, your record has been expunged, it doesn't even appear on your record, what you're saying is now that guy who got busted for a marijuana infraction for something that is now legal, when he goes to apply for a job, it's really the guy on the other side of the desk that gets to decide what the social import of that conviction is.
And that's exactly how it should be. That's precisely how it should be.
But isn't that just saying that the individual then gets to decide what is morally right and wrong in this society?
No. What by having the conviction on your record and then being set free, which I think is the most reasonable case, that means that there is a stigma attached to that person that follows them for the rest of their life. Let's just say it's a felony conviction just to streamline things a little bit, okay? And that person deserves to have that there because they've committed a felony. Now, if I am an employer and I look at somebody who comes in and I ask them on their questionnaire, have you ever been convicted of a felony? And they write yes. And then the next question is, if so, what kind? And then they write marijuana possession. I, as an employer now, have the ability to decide whether or not I want to hire that person. If I think that dealing dope is not a big deal, then I hire the guy. If, on the other hand, I think somebody who's willing to commit a felony maybe he's not somebody I want poking around in the cash box, then I get to decide not to. But the reason that this is fair is because it states that you have committed a crime when the law was in effect, that you broke the law. Now you're set free. I'm fine with that in the cases of these marijuana things. But now you have to be responsible for what you did. And this is the age where no one's responsible for anything.
But you're not only
it goes from possession of a joint all the way up to making accusations that Donald Trump colluded with the Russians. There's no consequences for doing criminal activities. There's just no consequences for it, and we wonder why things are falling apart. So I'm sorry. Back to your.
Well, no, I was just to say you're practically calling for not eternal, but at least this full lifespan responsibility. So let's say somebody breaks the law as it is right now.
A felony is a felony.
Yes,
and if you commit a felony,
so you commit a felony, you pay the price for your crime, and you're saying that should dog somebody for the rest of their life, even if that is no longer a crime.
No, I am not saying that. What I'm saying is, if it turns out that you committed the crime, you committed the felony, and that means that you have lost your right to be presumed innocent because you've been found guilty of a major crime. Now, in terms of this dogging people for the rest of their lives, that's going to have to come down to a person-by-person basis. But nevertheless, it still tells you something about the character of that person that they committed a felony. I'm 60 years old next month. I haven't committed any misdemeanors. Not a misdemeanor charge on my record.
Well, and let's not, because I know we're going to have some attorneys watching this show, and they're going to debate our use of the term felony versus misdemeanor. And I'd rather keep it on a broader basis of just a breach of the law. But your whole point before was saying I, as the potential marijuana possessor or user, do not have a right to decide whether I like the law or not.
Right.
But then you're turning around and giving that right to my future employer or the guy who won't employ me because he decides whether he thinks that what society's laws are right or wrong.
You would have a point there if hiring that person was illegal in the future, but it's not. So if you're saying that I've turned over the responsibility for punishing this guy over to somebody in the future, that's exactly correct. The person has I'm willing to say that when they accept their conviction, that's enough punishment. That's it. They can go, right? That's the model that we're working for here. So to say that it's now up to the discretion of a future employee whether he wants to break the law or not, I'm not saying that at all. Because, Scott, hiring him now is not breaking the law. Nobody's breaking the law by hiring a guy who was convicted of marijuana dealing. If a guy comes in tomorrow and has that on his application, I can hire him, and I haven't broken any laws, and I haven't committed any moral violations either, because this guy has served his time or whatever. He's paid his debt to society. Here's his little mark against him now. And now I get to decide whether or not I want to trust this guy or not. And what I would probably do is I might trust him if he seemed like a trustworthy guy, and I might put him in a lower position and have him earn some trust, and that's how life works. But to say that the guilt or innocence of the person is being handed down to the person who decides to hire them is nuts. If he decided to hire them as a marijuana dealer, let's rephrase that. If he decided to hire them as a heroin dealer, which would still be illegal presumably, then you might have some kind of case. But as it turns out, there's no case at all. You're making the person who committed the crime bear responsibility for the commission of that crime, and then you are allowing the freedom of decision among not just among employers, but everybody else in society gets to decide for themselves. Am I willing to associate with this person? Yes or no? Have they paid their debt to society? Yes or no? If somebody does 10 years for armed robbery, let's say, and comes out of prison and doesn't commit any more armed robberies, I'm fine with that guy. That guy may have learned a lesson. It's presumably the idea, but I have a right to know. And to say that this is an invasion of his privacy is or some kind of burden that's laid on him. You're damn right it's a burden that's laid on him. It's a burden that is laid on him by his own actions to commit major crimes.
Well, and again, you keep saying major crimes. We're mostly talking about the states where it's been legalized. They haven't legalized anybody who wants to go out there and sell bales of marijuana.
Hang on. Look, anybody who goes to jail, given the overcrowding that we have today, when I say jail, I don't mean the overnight tank.
Well, remember, there are three categories, though. Jail,
when somebody... Yep.
Awaiting trial, and people who have a marijuana conviction on their record. Doesn't mean they went to jail, but they have that in their record. Should that not be expunged is the question.
No, it should not be expunged. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So I'm picturing a future incident here.
To expunge it is to say that these people didn't do anything wrong when in point of fact they absolutely did do something wrong and they knew it. I have a right to know that. And if they don't like it, maybe they shouldn't have committed the crime in the first place. Doesn't matter what they think about the law. It doesn't matter. And furthermore, if you're going to say that all you have to do is retroactively overturn a law and then the punishment for that just goes away, like it never happened, well, that's nuts. That's just insane. There are consequences to your behaviors. And this is why we have laws. And to just say, hey, you know what? Since we overturned this law, turns out that while you were committing this felony, it turns out you actually weren't, except in the future. So now what? So now I get to decide to do whatever I want to, no matter what the law says, with the hope that someday somebody's going to overturn this law, and then it won't just be like I'll be released, but it will be like it never happened.
I'm somewhat facetiously picturing in my mind a future job interview, and when the interview is over, the boss who was interviewing the potential employee hands him a marijuana joint, lights up one himself, and they start smoking. And the interviewee says, "Well, gee, man, I'm really glad that you're cool with this whole dope smoking thing because of my previous conviction upon that." And the boss says, "Oh no, man! I'm not going to hire you. You broke the law when this was illegal."
But don't you see how this is exactly precisely how society is supposed to work, right? Isn't this exactly how it's supposed to work? You broke the law. Let's take marijuana off the table. Let's take armed robbery. You broke the law. You did 5 years for armed robbery. You come into my office and you apply for a job. You put down on your application that you committed a felony because I'm going to do a background check anyway and find out. So you say yes. What was the felony? It was armed robbery. That's a serious charge. All right. Then I have a chance to take a look at this person, talk to them, ask them about it, gauge whether or not I feel like they've changed. I get to make a free will decision whether to hire that person or not. And if I decide to, great. If I decide not to, that's also great. That's my decision. It's not society-wide. And to say that in this particular case, since we're talking about specifics, to say that having a marijuana conviction means that you'll never work in this state of California again is just not much of an argument, because believe it, I almost said believe it or not, but that would have been something I would have said in the 70s or 60s. There are employers out there and potential dates and all other social connections who would look at a marijuana conviction as a feature, not a bug. You know, you went to jail for dealing pot? Yeah. Oh man, that is cold. You're hired. But you get to decide. People get to decide based on the information. You cannot wash clean a crime that was committed at the time it was a crime. It's a crime. You may argue it shouldn't have been a crime, okay, and you may argue it was a stupid law, fine. But the bottom line is, the person that was convicted of this knew it was a crime, took the risk, and now is paying for the consequences.
The members at BillWhittle.com make this kind of discussion possible. And if I could only pronounce the name of the law firm whose website I read this question on, I would give them credit for it. It is something like Kreis Enderle, Kreisenderle. Like to attribute that to them. But a fascinating article published late last year under Expungement of Records for Marijuana-Related Convictions in Michigan.
Nuts.
Yeah, so this is a more fun discussion than I really thought was going to come of this. And this is what is exciting about this program, because we engage these topics as they come up and with the principles that we have when we arrive here in front of the camera, just like you have to engage your discussions and conversations in the marketplace. You don't have time to, have a briefing. You don't have time to do lots of research. You need to be able to answer questions on the fly. And we hope even just seeing us wrestle with these questions.
Yeah, because I don't know what's coming. And I don't mean to interrupt a very nice close, but just so everybody understands my personal position on this, I would look at individuals as individuals, and I would not find a felony conviction disqualifying if I felt strongly enough about that person's character. If somebody came into me and said, I made a mistake, I was wrong, I paid my debt to society, I'd like another chance, that would work wonders with me.
Well, and I guess I owe my own job here to that kind of an attitude.
What? Yeah, maybe.
No. Ladies and gentlemen, most of the members at BillWhittle.com have not had any felonies on their record, nor even misdemeanors. They're just decent, common sense citizens who are providing the funding for this enterprise, and we appreciate their ministrations to us on a daily basis. We get a lot of letters, by the way, a lot of notes. Letters is an old-fashioned way to say it. A lot of emails and a lot of comments of encouragement, and I try to acknowledge each one of those as we can, but we don't get a chance to do so for everyone. So I just want to kind of give a blanket thank you to all the people who have written Bill and Steve and I notes of appreciation and encouragement. So thank you for that. If you'd like to become part of that encouraging crew, you can go to BillWhittle.com and hit that Become a Member link. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members for making this show possible.